Eamon Khan here for Seconds Out with the one and only Bloody Elbow reporter, Donagh Corby. Donagh, great to see you. How's life treating you?
Good to be back, Eamon. In fact, promoted. In fact, deputy editor of Bloody Elbow. So, not just a reporter anymore, not just a pretty face, but yes, it's a honor and a privilege to be on with you. Happy New Year. Too late, probably. Statute of limitations is up. Who cares?
Too late, but we've got some breaking news, and you're the man for news on this scene. First of all, Jake Paul versus Canelo. Jake was teasing an announcement last night. Nothing official has happened, but some credible sources online are suggesting this is going down on Cinco de Mayo weekend. Is it the case? Jake Paul versus Canelo? Is it truly going to happen?
Yeah, so the sources are good, and there is a little bit of something to it, but it is beginning to look like, from what I'm hearing, and also just in general with the later reports, like I'm not the first to be telling you this, that it's probably not going to happen. I mean, not that Canelo's team would be worried about potentially messing up that September date with Terence Crawford, but I think just in general now's not the time. Canelo would have to bulk up quite a bit to fight Jake, and then come back down to 168 to fight Terence Crawford. So yeah, it's not feasible right now. And I think even Jake tweeted a date that is nothing like Cinco de Mayo. Now that might be a date for Taylor Serrano 3 possibly, but for now it's looking like Jake is going to do something else in New York City on July 5th, and maybe no Cinco de Mayo.
Is there any irons in the fire, any whispers as to who Jake Paul's next opponent might be?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Canelo's not absolutely out of the question, and I think if you talk about like fights that Netflix would be interested in as a promotion, I mean, Canelo's probably the only one. I don't think, if Netflix wanted to do this KSI fight, then Netflix would make it happen. You know, someone would get in there and talk to the zone, would talk to Mams, would talk to Nikisa, would talk to the Sauerlands and all of that, and the fight would happen. So I think it's that maybe doesn't qualify as one that would qualify, but definitely Jake Paul versus Canelo would be big. In terms of other fights that are out there, he might. I have a feeling he's going to veer more in the like Andre August, Ryan Borland direction again, and fights. This isn't based on insider sources or anything, but you know, I spoke to Nikisa when I was in Dubai at the PFL event. He was there. Didn't give me anything. He's good at that. I mean, Mams is not so good. Mams Taylor is not so good at not giving you anything. Nikisa is very good at it, and I've been in touch with some high up sources in MVP as well. And the interesting thing when it comes to this Canelo thing is that usually I would at least get a it's not happening, come on, or something. But I messaged about this Canelo thing, got no response, which is very rare. So you never know.
Right then, we have a breaking development, Dunner, which renders our previous conversation obsolete. So, the second time of asking, I've brought you on again. Thank you for joining to react to the latest news that KSI does now have an opponent, and it is a former opponent in the form of Dillon Danis. What's your immediate reaction to that news breaking?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's an opponent that definitely like. I mean, it's not a compelling fight, but it's like a whole spectacle and a show that immediately, like, I'm messaging editors and messaging different people like, oh, we got to get out to Manchester and we got to do this, we got to do that, because Dillon Danis just brings me, like I say, he doesn't bring an interesting fight, but he brings everything else of interest. And so I think it's kind of what they basically needed. I'm already seeing people on his timeline justify it, even though the same people who would have slammed Jake Paul for fighting Nate Diaz, an actual established mixed martial artist who's fought for world titles after he lost to Tommy, are now saying that it's cool that KSI is fighting Dillon Danis, who's 0-1 as a boxer, who's, you know, I think in his boxing career threw about 3 or 4 punches against Logan Paul over the 6 rounds. So it's just it's funny that how that works, but yeah, I think it's like a fight gives some degree of intrigue, and Dillon Danis is just such a wild character. You remember you were there in Manchester that night in the end, and the anticipation for his like ring walk. And then when he didn't show up on the ramp, he came in a different way. It was like, oh my gosh, he's actually not going to show up. And like he weighed in and he showed up at the press conference, and he at every different interval, the buzz was crazy. Like, oh my gosh, he's made it this far. He landed in Manchester. whoa, that's nuts. And then he did a media day. Whoa, that's crazy. And then he shows up at the press conference. Whoa, I can't believe he shows up at the open workout. And he's kind of fecking around at the open workout. He doesn't do a real workout. He's doing jiu-jitsu. He's doing wrestling. He's doing pro wrestling. He's jumping off the top rope. And then he gets to, press conference, and then he weighs in. And they face off. And then it gets fight night. And his thing is on the screen. And even when it's on the screen, Dillon Danis making his way to the ring, and your man Hus Ragib is doing the announcements. And, and you're still going, I don't know if he's going to show up. Now, I don't think they have the same intrigue on this one, because he probably will show up. He's not as big of a star now as he was 2 years ago. He needs the money a bit more than he needed it 2 years ago. So I think just in general, that takes a little bit of it away, but it's still like probably the best case scenario for the kind of opponent they needed to be fighting. I think it's probably the best case.
Do you think the money that Dillon might need in context of law cases ongoing, or suits or lawsuits ongoing, remove the roadblock that he had, the stipulation that he had, which when he said that he didn't want to return in terms of boxing, but was hoping to do some sort of crossover MMA type bout? Is that what's meant that he's laced on the gloves again because he needs a bit of money?
Yeah, I think so. He signed to this GFL allegedly. I think he's on Team New York in that. So I guess maybe he's going to be active this year, right? Maybe he's going to have this boxing match. NFL starts in April. I think they were talking about doing the Tony Ferguson fight with him and Dillon Danis in June or July. So if he can get himself a little boxing match and a huge big payday for a boxing match, I mean, AO Arena in Manchester is huge. What, 21,000 capacity? KSI pay-per-view draw is probably one of the most steadfast in the sport. Like, you can't absolutely guarantee that Tank Davis is going to do 100,000 pay-per-views. He probably is in most of these times. But if he fights someone who's not that good, like, I don't think this fight on March 2nd is going to sell 100,000 pay-per-views, or at least a huge amount more than that. Ryan Garcia cannot guarantee these kinds of things, whereas KSI can absolutely guarantee you 200,000 pay-per-views if he fights a literal nobody like Joe Fournier, who has absolutely zero drawing power, or someone like an Anthony Taylor or whatever. Like, you can guarantee nailed on certainty at 20 quid a head or 25 quid a head, he will sell the pay-per-views. And then Dillon Danis does add to that as well. He's a great supplementary fighter in that regard. So yeah, great kind of for the excitement. And yeah, I think he probably does need the money, but maybe he'll finally get this activity he's looking for and get to show us you know, the game plan. I think KSI will be more open and more susceptible to what it was Dillon was looking to do against Logan. I think Logan is just a little bit too long in the tooth in terms of like combat. Like, obviously KSI has been boxing longer, but Logan's been wrestling. Logan and Jake have been playing like football. It's not combat, but it's like American football, like very combative of a sport. Like, Logan wasn't going to get drawn into what Dillon was looking to do, whereas I think KSI probably could as the rounds wear on a bit, and I think that will make for actually quite an interesting contest.
Yeah, you've alluded to it in your previous answers, but what type of affair is this going to be in the ring? Do you think this is going to be? Do you think there will be entertaining spots in there? And who do you think does get the hand raised, and by what method?
I think in boxing, you'd probably have to be nuts to back Dillon Danis in most fights at this level. Like, I think KSI just trains more. It's his promotion. It's his own show. I think you would have to back KSI to do it. He's got a huge punching power, a lot more punching power probably than Logan does. He's more awkward. I think it's gonna. I mean, I didn't think there could be a worse fight than Logan and Dillon, and then they had KSI and Tommy just minutes afterwards. But I think it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be good to watch. I think there's probably more of a chance if you hate Dillon Danis that you're going to see a knockout than there was the last time. But then I can't see how he'll make it as personal as he made the last one. So will there be as much of a like? I mean, Dillon Danis was actually weirdly going into that last one quite popular. But there was like a weird air of like people were kind of. There was a lot of people excited to see him get beaten up. But there was a lot of people excited to see him fight at all. So I think it's tough. It's hard to know exactly, but I reckon yeah, you have to pick KSI in any boxing contest. Although in MMA, it wouldn't even be like, I mean, there's no way it could be any way close. I mean, Dillon would obliterate him, but with just those tools, it's a tough one. And yeah, I think it's going to be farcical if it goes any sort of distance, if it goes any sort of length of time. These fights do not tend to be entertaining if they go the 6 to 8 rounds. It'll probably be 6 rounds as well. So yeah, I expect scrappy, unexciting, but potential for a big knockout.
Very last thing, and speaking of fun, Creator Clash 3 returns. I'll be hoping it's fun and a
Yes.
financial success with the tagline influencers will pay. Apparently, or it appears to be that the headline is Harley Morenstein. Harley Davidson is the bicycle brand, motorbike brand. Harley Morenstein versus LA Beast. I'm sure LA Beast has eaten some bicycle motorcycle parts in the past anyways, but he will be putting on the gloves instead of ingesting things alongside a number of other fights and more to be announced. IDubbbz doesn't appear on the card for now, but we'll be hoping this is more of a success than the last iteration.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, the last iteration, the amount that they talk about what a flop it was, it still sold a huge amount of tickets. It still did some decent, like it didn't do great pay-per-view, it didn't do what the first one did. But I think uh there was also a really weird like phony outrage around the last one that I think hopefully won't be around this one. I reckon it's going to be. I mean, look, none of those names really like jump out. I mean, Harley is exciting too, and this LA Beast guy is apparently a big deal, or at least he's one of these guys who I think we were saying this just off camera. The beauty of Creator Clash is like I used to watch this guy. Oh, remember when this guy did this? So yeah, I guess maybe they'll get a few more big names in. I mean, I want IDubbbz to fight someone whom he might beat. That would be nice, like someone who he could be competitive with. He was pretty competitive with Wasabi, actually, all
Hmm.
things considered. I mean, for how good Wasabi is, he should have really been beaten out a bit easier than he did. But yeah, I think it should be a fun event. I wouldn't mind going to it again. The first one was great. I didn't go to the second one. The atmosphere at the first one was like nothing I've ever seen. It was insane, and the numbers on the Mirror at the time when I was working at the Daily Mirror, crazy numbers. So there is definitely an appetite for this kind of thing. It's had a year off, so let's see what the appetite is like. But this is proper. Like this Creator Clash is the kind of thing that gets the juices flowing a bit more. Even though I'm not a huge fan of any of these particular people, but Creator Clash, I watched that brand risk boxing. Did you see this Aiden Ross
Didn't catch it now.
over the weekend? That's the kind of thing. Like it's not good. It's definitely not good. Like just to like, it's not. The Misfits fights are better. The Misfits production is better. Everything about Misfits is like on paper better than all these things. But it's like old school YouTube boxing, like Joe Weller and Theo Baker fighting it out in a little shed with True Geordie commentating on his phone, and then you get the Joe Weller and KSI at the Copper Box, and then KSI and Logan. That was like a little like that was old school like YouTube boxing stuff, and I feel like Creator Clash gives you a bit of that. This brand risk boxing, you've got to see this. It was insane. They had this one guy, this little short fat guy. I don't know where he was from, but he had a Mexican flag. He's like an Andy Ruiz type of guy. And then there was this other dude called Vex Bolts, and the little Andy Ruiz guy smashed Vex Bolts around, and then they had a robbery decision, and it was very very funny. And then it was like they Vex Bolts needed oxygen afterwards, and they had Sexy Red on commentary, the rapper. It was an insane show, and just all of that like silliness, like crazy stuff. Like remember Kingpin? Remember how much fun we
Yeah.
had at Kingpin?
Hmm.
That's what we need more of. Again, not to like Misfits is great, but I was saying this to Mams the other day when we were talking. Misfits is almost like too good now that it's like some of the fights, maybe some of the fights aren't great, but like you watch the whole big production and everything, and you're like, it's weird that this type of event is getting the whole DAZN treatment. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the like you're watching. I mean, Gavino versus Adam Brooks, or Afghan Dan versus Little T. Remember that one?
Hmm.
And you're like, geez, do they need the whole DAZN production on this? And Mams' point he was making was like, well, it's very funny that Afghan Dan and Little T was being presented in the same way as like Jack Catterall's next fight, which is pretty funny, I guess. But I think in general, yeah, the Creator Clash thing and the brand risk promotions, they kind of get the juices going a little bit more than that. What do you reckon? You excited for Creator Clash?
I am, yeah. I would like to see if there's a possibility that Creator Clash do some media coverage in our form, and maybe we could
Yeah,
get over. And if they open the doors, they haven't been too open to want to open those doors. But if they do, I'd be certainly interested to go and cover the show.
What'll be very interesting will be like how they present all of that stuff, because like I remember the second one, like the first one I went and they had this whole thing about, I don't know how much the viewers will care about this, but I think it's still whatever. They had this whole thing about like no interviews, right? Like no,
Yeah.
the fighters won't be doing any post-fight interviews, which is unheard of at any sort of boxing show. So I just went and just didn't take heed of that. I just went backstage and asked Harley, can I do an interview? Asked your man Dad, could I do an interview? Justin Minks at the time is doing it as well. All the stars are here. Harley Morenstein, all these people. So you know, it was a whole thing. And then the second year, Fred was going to go out. Fred Talks Fighting, Fred Beck to go, and they didn't want Fred there, which is nuts. If you're doing a YouTube boxing event, to not want Fred there and to not push the boat out to get Fred there.
Yeah.
I mean, Brander's Promotions got Fred there, and it's a huge addition. I mean, it makes the shows the shows. Do you know what I mean? Like, you need, if it's a YouTube boxing show, Fred has to be there in some capacity, running around with the red shirt on, doing his interviews. And so, yeah, I hope they're a little bit more open with that. I mean, I don't even want to get into the whole Sam thing, but I would hope that they if there's no Sam Hyde related drama this year, which I'd be amazed. I mean, it's February now, it's in June. I'd be stunned if he hasn't inserted himself into it in some way in the next few months. But they should be more open to that kind of thing. He's way more palatable now than he was a couple of years ago. I think all of that stuff, if they could just take themselves a little bit less seriously this year, they'll have a lot more success. And I really would love for it to be a big success, because it's great for the whole scene, which I do think is just not as interesting now as it was a couple of years ago.
Well, we wait for more announcements. What is always interesting is a conversation with yourself, Donagh, and for anyone who wants to find Donagh's latest work, you can find that at bloodyelbow.com. But for now, thank you, Donagh, for joining Seconds Out, and we'll catch you on the next one.
bloodyelbow.com. Thank you.